Governments constantly tell you they're working for your economic freedom. They talk about stability, growth, opportunity, and all that. But when you look at history a bit more carefully, you see something much darker. Governments have always resorted to hidden tricks to keep ordinary people broke while consolidating wealth and power for themselves. And the most surprising part is that these tricks aren't new. They've been recycling the same things for centuries, wrapping them in different packages, selling them under new names. But the purpose is always the same: transfer wealth to the upper class and keep the majority dependent. Let's start with the oldest and simplest trick: inflation. When a government spends more money than it collects in taxes, it has two options: either tell the truth and openly tax its citizens, which is politically dangerous, or secretly devalue the money and reduce the value of every coin, every banknote in circulation. Ancient Rome mastered this. In the 3rd century AD, emperors struggling with military expenses started reducing the silver content in the denarius, the currency unit in ancient Rome. A coin that was once almost pure silver eventually became copper with just a thin silver coating on top. The empire acted as if everything was the same, but everyone holding those coins paid the price. Inflation exploded, savings evaporated, wages couldn't keep up with this pace. It was a silent tax on the people, a trick still used today, just with central banks instead of imperial mints. The Middle Ages brought another version of this game: forced loans. Kings in England, France, and Spain constantly pressured wealthy merchants and guilds to give money to the crown. Of course, these weren't voluntary loans or anything like that. Say no and you'd face fines, asset seizure, or worse. Sometimes the king promised repayment with interest, but repayment either came late, came in devalued currency, or never came at all. The government maintained its wars and expenses, while merchants had no choice but to hand over their capital. That was the trick: disguise extortion as patriotism or duty. And it worked for centuries. By the 17th century, the financial system itself became the trick. Britain didn't establish the Bank of England in 1694 out of charity. The government needed money to fight France. The wealthy bought government bonds, and in return, the crown guaranteed interest payments financed by taxes. Sounds fair, right? But think about who paid those taxes. Ordinary people threw taxes on things like salt, beer, and cloth. The rich lent money to the government and earned safe interest. The poor paid higher taxes to finance those interest payments. It was a money transfer system dressed up as national finance, and it established a pattern that continues today. The safest investments in the world are lending to governments, and these returns are ultimately guaranteed by the labor and consumption of the masses. Now come to the modern world. The trick is everywhere. Take deficit spending. Governments pile up huge debts, issuing bonds bought by investors, banks, and foreign powers. Politicians tell the public it's for infrastructure, jobs, social programs. But most of it flows to defense contractors, corporate subsidies, and bailout packages. When it's time to pay back, governments don't cut palace spending. They raise taxes, inflate the currency, or slash social benefits. The trick is this: the debt looks like it's for the people, but the burden falls on their backs while the profits go into bondholders' pockets. Then there are bailouts. In the 2008 financial meltdown, banks made crazy bets, turned toxic mortgages into securities, and nearly collapsed the global economy. Who paid the price? Those obligated to pay taxes through massive government bailout packages. Who profited afterward? Those same banks, emerging bigger and more powerful than before. The trick was simple: privatize the gains, socialize the losses, and tell the public this was a necessary situation to save the system. The way governments handle retirement and pensions is sleight of hand, too. For decades, people in America, Britain, and across Europe deposited money into government systems, trusting the money would be there when they retired. But governments usually don't actually save that money. They spend it immediately and leave promissory notes in its place. The promise is this: future taxpayers will cover the cost when the bill comes due. It's basically a generational Ponzi scheme wrapped in official language. It works until demographics change, the population ages, and the system becomes unsustainable. Then the government reforms it, usually by reducing benefits, raising the retirement age, or inflating away the value of payments. Do you see the pattern? At every stage, the trick relies on perception. The public is told inflation is growth, forced loans are duty, national debt is investment, bailouts are stability, pension cuts are innovation. The language masks the reality. A transfer of wealth from the many to the few, from bottom to upper classes. History shows this trick has worked for centuries because most people don't study economic history, don't understand financial systems, and don't see the trap until it's too late. In recent decades, the tricks have only gotten more sophisticated. Consider quantitative easing, a term most of us had never heard before. 2008, central banks created trillions of dollars out of thin air to calm markets, buying government bonds and mortgage-backed securities. Politicians and bankers told the public it was necessary to prevent collapse, and it worked for the financial system. Asset prices soared. Stocks, real estate, bonds all gained value. But who owns most of those assets? The wealthy. For a normal household without big investments, the benefits were minimal, while the downside came as distorted markets and rising living costs. The trick was this: money creation saved the system for those at the top while fueling inflation and inequality for everyone. Another modern trick is stealth taxation. Instead of directly raising income taxes, governments quietly tax through sales taxes, fuel taxes, and most importantly, inflation. When prices rise faster than wages, the gap is essentially a hidden tax on savings and purchasing power. Governments love inflation because it reduces the real value of their debts. But for you, it erodes financial freedom. You might feel richer because your salary is nominally higher. But if your expenses outpace your earnings, you're actually losing wealth. This isn't a bug in the system, it's the system itself. Inflation isn't just an accident of economics. It's one of the most consistent tricks governments use to shift the burden of their spending onto you without ever admitting it. Then there's regulatory capture. On the surface, regulations are meant to protect the public. Financial rules, safety standards, consumer rights. But history shows us time and again that powerful industries influence the very agencies that are supposed to oversee them. Railroads in the 19th century, oil companies in the 20th, today, tech and finance, they've all shaped the rules in their favor. It's the same dynamic Peaky Blinders learned on a small scale in Birmingham streets. Better to buy the referee than fight the game. Governments use regulation to appear protective, but behind the curtain, the biggest corporations carve out loopholes that keep competition down and profits flowing. The public sees protection, insiders see profit. War finance is an old trick in new clothes. During World War I and II, governments issued massive amounts of bonds, telling citizens it was their patriotic duty to buy them. People thought they were supporting their nation, and they were. But those bonds also became profitable, risk-free investments for the wealthy, guaranteed by future taxes. Same in the 21st century. The trillions spent on Iraq and Afghanistan were financed through debt that enriched defense contractors, banks, and bondholders, while ordinary taxpayers paid the bill. The trick is this: wars are always presented as temporary emergencies. But the financial burdens last for generations, long after the soldiers return home. Governments also use complexity itself as a trick. Tax codes, thousands of pages long. Financial instruments so complicated, even professionals struggle to explain them. Budgets filled with hidden items and jargon. All of this creates an environment where ordinary people can't track how money is flowing. Complexity becomes camouflage. If you can't see the wealth transfer, you can't resist it. In ancient Rome, debased coins were the physical sign of the trick. Today it's balance sheets buried under acronyms and vague programs. Same trick. Make it too complex for the public to follow, and the transfer proceeds unnoticed. Why does this matter now? Because the tricks are alive and accelerating. Inflation is eating your savings. Debts keep growing every year. Bailouts remain the first reflex when markets wobble. Central banks keep manipulating the money supply. Governments pass costs to the public in such indirect ways that most people can't even connect the dots. The result? A system designed to make you work harder for less real wealth, while the financial elite grows stronger. The lesson from history is this: these tricks don't just exist, they always come back. When Rome debased its coins, citizens suffered. When kings forced loans, merchants lost fortunes. When modern states create inflation and borrow, households bear the burden. Different ages, same mechanism. And here's the harsh truth. Most people will never escape these tricks because they're not even aware they're being played. They see inflation as natural, taxes as inevitable, bailouts as mercy. They believe government messaging instead of studying economic history. Ignorance is the most powerful trick itself. When people forget the past, they can't recognize its repetition. That's why governments and elites prefer a public ignorant about finance. Financial education is resistance. Economic history is a weapon. If you know the tricks, you're harder to deceive. So what should you do? First, always look beyond the headline. When governments announce stimulus, ask who profits first. When inflation rises, remember it's not just coincidence, it's policy. When regulations come out, ask who wrote them and who benefits. Second, build real wealth outside the traps. Assets that can hold value even when currency doesn't. Third, never assume the system works for you just because it says it does. Systems exist to protect themselves, not you. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it'll crush you just the same. The financial tricks that kept Roman citizens broke are the same ones draining your account today, just dressed in modern language. The only difference is whether you recognize them in time. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe.